Hey there. So this is a photo by Ryan Tudor. And what you can see going on here is there is a man on a motorcycle, and in the background there's a car, and it's a great shot. The only problem is the car is kind of an unwanted actor in the scene, and it kind of distracts from the subject a little bit. So we're going to use a little bit of Photoshop magic to remove that car and to make the photo a little bit more condensed down to the subject matter and what we want to see. It's actually a really awesome shot. And it would be a shame if this, whatever it is, a cord or this, whatever this white sedan is, ruined the whole thing. So we're going to use Photoshop. Right now I have the file open in Adobe Photoshop, and my version of Photoshop looks a little bit different than yours probably, but bear with me. So I'm going to make a duplicate of the background layer. So I always have a version that I can access without having to open the file again or, revert to the original. So I've got the background layer duplicated here. I'm just going to work right on the layer. Now, I'm going to use a combination of cloning tools and brush tools to recreate what's going on here. And this image is a little bit of a special case because there's a lot of sharpening going on here. This image has already been edited by Ryan, and you see this is not the intended publication size. It's actually, if you zoom out a little bit, you retain this sharpness without the halo effects and the things that happen from the addition of contrast and the sharpening effects and whatnot. So right about here is where we want, 50% or so is what we want the image to look perfect at. Now we might see a little bit of some mismatched pixels or distortions and things here at the 100%, but I'm going to do my very best to show you how to remove all these things and make it still retain the look of the original. So first and foremost, I'm going to use the lasso tool. You can click right here, and your toolbar might be somewhere on the left probably. It's probably actually on the left over here. You can also hit the L button, and once I have that, I want to make sure that anti-alias for this image at least is turned off and the feathering is on 0. And the reason I'm not using any anti-aliasing on this image is because with the sharpening that's happened here, a lot of the aliased pixels are more present than the anti-alias pixels. There is anti-aliasing on this, like for example, if I zoom in, you can see instead of just going to pure white, the black first blends to this kind of taupe beige color. I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but it makes life a little easier. Like right here, you see there's absolutely no anti-aliasing going on at all because of the sharpening. So on most cases, you'll be using the anti-alias button checked up in the upper left corner. So I'm just going to use this lasso tool in conjunction with the Alt or Option button, depending on what kind of computer you have, to make a nice, clean selection roughly around where that helmet should be. And if you lose a few pixels here and there, don't worry. It's not going to change the story of what's happening in this picture. And once I have that selected, I'm going to go to Layer, New, Layer via Copy. And what that does, if I hide the other layers below, you'll see that just the helmet is there. And that's essentially created a mask on a top layer, and I'll just name that, well, it's funny, it's a mask of the helmet. I'll name that helmet. And so if I do something behind here, like, say I want to paint in some yellow colors or something like that, you'll see that it retains the transparency and the shape of the helmet here. So now what I'm going to do is the first thing I'm going to address is the shadow being cast by the car. And this is kind of an easy fix. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab a brush, just a soft edged brush, and bring it down to about the size of where I'm going to be painting. And with the Alt button pressed down, you'll see a little crosshair comes up. In this video, sometimes when I'm recording with this software, it doesn't show you the correct cursor icons, but in your Photoshop, some kind of a crosshair or an eyedropper icon will come up, and this is sampling the color here. And I want to grab the shadow color from around the car, not the shadow being cast by the car, but the shadows that are from the trees and whatnot. Say, right in here. With my brush selected, up here in the upper left corner, I'm going to click on the mode and select Lighten. And what Lighten does is any pixels that are darker than the ones that I'm painting with, this beige color over here, it's going to keep those pixels and lighten them. But anything that's brighter is not going to affect. So you see I'm painting right over it, and it's essentially just affecting that shadow itself. Now that's not all too natural looking. I'm going to blend that out by fading it down to maybe 50% or so. All right. Now, that shadow is mostly taken care of. A little adjustment here and there. Fade it again. Now the big problem, the car. So how do we do that? Going to be a lot of manual painting going on here, and you might hear me breathing a little bit now and then as I'm kind of figuring out what I'm doing. But I'm going to use this. This is the patch tool, and it is accessible by clicking that button or holding this down. It might, yours probably will look like a band-aid for the healing brush tool, but I want you to select the patch tool or press J or Shift J until you get to it. If you hold down Shift and press the J button, you'll see it's cycling through over here. And the patch tool just looks like a patch you put on a pair of jeans. And what the patch tool does is you can use the lasso essentially to select an area, and once you have the area that you're going to patch selected, you drag it to somewhere else, like say right here, and let go, and it replaces what you've just selected and patched. The problem that happens is a lot of times the contrast of the area around where the tool is patching is so high or so low that it will greatly affect the computed result in the end, so that you saw a minute ago there's a bit of strange white colors that came up. So sometimes it's just trial and error. You gotta go at it a few times, and I'm gonna select the brush tool again, and I'm gonna grab one of these green colors that's light, and I'm gonna select darken. When I paint over this, you'll see that any of these bright white highlight areas, they're being painted in with that green, but the black is staying where it's at. So I'm not just destroying every bit of pixel data that's there, I'm just painting over the bright areas that I don't like. And again, I'm going to fade that out. Now it's looking a little more appropriate. And I'm going to use the clone tool now that I patched that out. And I'm going to sample from, say, let's say right here. And essentially what I'm doing now is painting in, and I want to take this down quite a bit actually, like say 30% opacity or so, because I'm trying to blend both what I just patched with data from over here on the right. The problem is a lot of times when you're cloning, the end result looks exactly like, you know, some area of the picture, and the eye notices that. You'll see and you're like, oh shoot, that's just a copy of that area over there, and it's kind of like a glitch in the matrix. So by doing this, you're kind of hiding some of those easily detectable artifacts. Now we still have a problem here. The car, it looks like predator vision, like it's got a cloaking device, because you still see the outline of the car. We're gonna have to do some manual painting, and for that I'm just gonna grab a brush, and I have a brush that comes with Photoshop. It's a chalk brush is what it's called. I'm just gonna start sampling these colors. And as I'm doing that, I'm painting right in here, just kind of making up where that sidewalk would be. And occasionally I'll grab another color to throw it in there. Like right now it's mostly a black color, but I also grabbed kind of a gray black that was there. And I just want to go over this. I also want to make sure I have darken turned off, of course. Grab that white, paint it in like so. Don't worry about it being totally perfect. You really can't get it that way. One trick that I like to use is I go to the brush submenu, I guess you'd call it, and I go to color dynamics, and I'm just gonna make the brightness jitter go up like 5% or so, and the saturation jitter about the same, hue about 1 or 2. And when I paint here, a bit of kind of noise happens. You can probably see that. If I make the brush even bigger, you'll definitely see it. There's a variation that happens on the color that you have selected. And that creates a nice, manageable noise that doesn't interfere with the quality of the picture. But when you're using these tools to paint, it makes it a little bit more realistic, a little bit more believable. because you don't want to be painting with just a solid color. It'll stand out kind of like when you watch, you know, the Roadrunner chasing Wile E. Coyote. You'll see the rock that's going to fall on Wile E. Coyote. You don't want that to happen. Very appropriate for an image of a speedster flying on a motorcycle. How cool is this picture, by the way? Look at that setup. Ryan composed this picture right around this curve. It's a nice little spot to go. Because the curve creates a leading line, it's actually creating the sense of motion. If this picture was just a bike leaning in a garage or just in a parking lot with no visible road behind it, you're not going to get the sense of he's taking the turn, he's leaning the bike a little bit to make that turn, and he's got some speed behind him. So this is a great shot. Definitely check out Ryan's photography on Facebook and give him props for it. Really cool. So now that I've got most of this painted away, I'm going to go back and kind of zoom out and zoom in. I just want to make sure it doesn't look wonky at all in any place, because when you're making edits like this, there's a tendency of things to not look too natural, and that's just a matter of fact. You know, when you're dealing with a reality like this photo, and then you're creating an unreality, so to speak. I think I want a little bit more of this tree to show, and how I'm going to do that is I'm going to make my brush smaller, and I'm going to take the opacity off so I've got it up to 100%, because I want to sample these colors directly now. And I'm just painting in myself, like, yeah, this kind of looks like where that tree trunk would be, and I'm grabbing that brown color and kind of throwing it in there and here. And now once I'm done kind of extending that down, I'm going to grab a little bit more of these twiggy, branchy color things, just throw them in place. I'm creating branches that don't actually exist now. And the implication of there's stuff going on in the background still. There's actually something there. There's, you know, real data, not just pretend data. Now to fix this up a little bit, there's still some contrast issues going on. I am going to feather this selection, you know, 10 or 11 pixels or so, and just grab this area, and I'm going to use the select and color range feature, and I want to grab just these low contrast kind of green grays that are in here. And I clicked on one of them, and I'm going to bring the fuzziness down to like 14 or 15% or so. That might have actually been too little. We'll see in a second. And I just want to darken that. So I'm going to grab this dark color and just kind of paint in here. And it was enough for a few of these pixels, but honestly, I'm going to undo that. I'll do the color range one more time. See, you don't want to select too much, because then you're painting the whole area in. I'll try 53%. And we'll see how it looks now. And I'll hide that selection while I paint with the darker color. And that's more what I was looking for. I want a little bit more contrast, not in the whole area, because then that area will be really high contrast and it'll stick out like a sore thumb again. All right. And I'm just going to fade that again a little bit. And now we have most of the image fixed up. You can see there's some blurriness going on here that I have to fix. Two things I'll do. I want to straighten these lines because these shadows are like tack sharp. So if I straighten these up a little bit, and add a little more contrast. There we go. And I definitely want to add some more contrast on the sidewalk area. And I'll drag the opacity up again. I'll just kind of paint in there. I want a very small, like 2 pixel brush for this work. And part of the issue with the painting here, why it's looking blurry compared to the rest, is going on. It has to do with the amount of noise that is sharpened by the sharpening algorithm. Essentially, the computer doesn't really understand what it's sharpening. It just thinks like, hey, that's some pixel data, and I'm gonna just, you know, sharpen the heck out of it. So in order to get that same effect for the areas that I've touched up here, that you see down in the rest of the dirt here, or the not the dirt, but the pavement rather. I'm going to actually sharpen this myself, and I'll feather that to say 5 or so. I'll grab this area that I painted in. I don't want to sharpen anything I don't have to, so I really don't have to touch much of that other area over here. And I'm going to sharpen it. I'm going to hide that selection by pressing Command H, and I'm going to go to Sharpen and Unsharp Mask. Now that's way too sharp. I'm going to bring the radius down to 1, and I'll bring the amount down to say 150 or so. Threshold up. We're going to do this one more time. I'm going to add a little bit of noise first too. And I want it monochromatic because I don't want the colors that I just selected being messed with. I just want the values being messed with. And I'm going to bring it down to say 10% or so. And I'm going to fade that down to 16%. And I'll try that sharpen one more time. This time I'll bring the threshold down, the radius up, and the amount down. And I'm going to fade that again. There's still some wonky stuff going on here. It's just kind of trial and error, you know, you gotta kind of go over it and say, eh. This time I'm going to grab the pencil tool, which is just pure pixels. It's not dealing with anything other than just vanilla pixels. And I'll drag it down to a small size, and I want the opacity to be controlled by my stylus pressure. And I'm just going to paint in that. That's so strange. There's something going on with my brush tool here. It's like not working. There we go. Wondering why that wasn't working exactly. And this area still looks kind of a little bit not sharp enough, so I'm just going over this with this pixel brush. Now, an image that hasn't been sharpened so severely for style, it's a lot easier to fix the image and then go back and apply these effects and sharpening algorithms too. But this is a great example. Sometimes you don't have that luxury. Sometimes you say, you know, you've got an image that you took many years ago, and you look at it, you say, you know, there's somebody photobombing me in my great Eiffel Tower picture, and I don't have thousands of dollars to go back to France right now to take another shot, and I really just want to print this and put it on my wall. And you just have to ask yourself, you know, is changing reality, is it that bad of a thing? Because you're not really changing the story. You're just changing some elements that happen in the story. So at this point, it's looking pretty good. There's still a little bit of room for improvement. I'm going to add a line. You can get to that by clicking here, or hitting U or Control U until you see a straight line come up. And I'm going to make sure it's on pixels and with no anti-aliasing. And I'm going to select this white color. And I'm just going to bring this down to like 20% or so. I'm going to try to break this up a little bit here. Now 1 pixel looks a little bit too computerized, so I'll try 2. And I want to layer that, just kind of go over the same spot here and there. I'll use my brush again. This is the pencil tool one more time. And I'll bring that opacity down. I think I'll try using that patch tool one more time. I want to get rid of as much of the effect you're seeing there as possible, and I'll fade that because you see these weird artifacts that it did. I'll fade that by it's down to 16%. There's still some blurriness going on here, so I'm going to select this one more time, and I will click sharpen. I'll just do sharpen more this time, and I'll fade that out 20%. I'll hit Command F to do it one more time. Fade that out. Now we're starting to look pretty good. I think I want to give a little more oomph to the sidewalk. It looks like the perspective is making the sidewalk look flat on the left side and more of the top of the sidewalk revealed on the right side. So I'm going to go in here one more time, and with the pencil tool, I'm going to paint over this. I want, say, 2 pixels or so. Well, sometimes you have to type it on the keyboard. Just going to go over this area. And I want this to be higher. I want this to be like 100% for the first few strokes. Actually, I think I'll just use the brush tool again. How about that? And it looks like because of the sharpening, there's kind of the effect of a contrast barrier, if you will, happening on the top side between the grass and, or not the grass, but the foliage and the sidewalk. You can see it more clearly on the right side here, this dark line that's being created. And we'll just go in here, kind of pepper that in there, maybe a hint or two of sidewalk lines that I'll fade out a little bit. Now, one thing I don't like with my edit here, I actually haven't sharpened any of this stuff yet. I don't want to sharpen those the bushes and stuff that I've done, but I do want to sharpen the stuff that I manually painted, in particular this tree trunk area. And I'll go to Unsharp Mask one more time. And all this stuff, you know, the numbers that I'm dialing in here don't matter. This is all to taste. So it depends on how your image looks and how you want it to look. And with that, fade that a little bit like I've done before. Now there still is sort of a lack of the detail that I want in this bushy area. And for all intents and purposes, it probably looks fine at this point. But I do want to clean this up a little bit more. I'll go in here and I will, I think I want a little more color. So I'm just going to grab the brush tool with, I've got a noise brush that essentially it's a bunch of noise that is repeated. I'll just paint with it here. You see this? So it's not like a smooth airbrush sort of effect. I'm going to bring the size down quite a bit, and I'm going to set my mode on color with, let's say 50%. I'm going to grab one of these greens in here. Actually, I want saturation, not color. And I just want to establish that there's a little bit more color going on here than what is already there. And I think I want to copy these little like twig things, and I'm just going to straight up copy them. So Command C, Command V. I'm going to drag them over here, and just to mix it up a little bit, I'll flip those horizontally, and I'll use my eraser with that noise tool, that noise brush rather. Here, Hear my dog barking in the background here. And I want to erase that just slightly. Once I've erased this down a little bit, I just want the indication that something's going on here. I don't want to necessarily fade it out all the way. There you go. And you see there's some blurriness going on with the sidewalk again because of the painting that happened. I will select that. I just want this little section here selected and sharpen it. Try sharpen more, sharpen edges. Nope, don't want that. I'll bring the threshold up a little bit. We're starting to look pretty good. I'll grab some white pixels with this pixel brush that I'm using now. I'll drag the opacity down a little bit. I'll bring it on, say, linear dodge at 18% or so. I can explain what all these things do if you're interested. There are some really technical explanations, and then of course there's just here's what this does and that'll get it done. So whatever you're interested in, I can always elaborate. If you have any comments or suggestions or questions, feel free to either post them on Facebook or post them as a reply to this video if you're a YouTube member and you do that sort of thing. I'm gonna break this up one more time. Let's do it on a new layer so I can fade this out. I'm adding the indication, the implied lines of sidewalk separators. Looking pretty good. I like this little bit of a meadow or grassy area that's showing through here. It creates kind of a mid-ground, if you will, between the sidewalk and the rest of the stuff. So I'm just going to indicate some more of that sort of thing in here. I'll bring my opacity up to 40% or so. And that'll about do it. Now you can spend hours on an image like this to make it absolutely perfect, and I recommend doing that if you're doing it for a magazine shoot or anything where millions of people are going to see it. But thus far, that looks pretty good to me. So I'll show you the before and the after. Now one extra thing I'll do here is something you might notice. Because of the sharpening effect, there are these halos that happen in high contrast areas. The helmet is mostly white from the exposure, and then around the helmet there's a bit of a halo. You can see this dark line happening here. It's kind of almost a comic book effect, isn't it? I'm just going to grab that color, make my pixel size, say 4 pixels wide or so, and I'm just going to lightly paint around the helmet to make this halo effect extend and continue on. And I'll sharpen that so on its own layer. And because I don't want him to look like he's been pasted in place, I'm going to fade that down to say 50% or so. Little details like that kind of make it all happen. So I'll flatten that helmet layer back onto the background layer, and there you go, before and after. Ta-da! Now if you want to get really creative, you can you know, go about just removing everything. Doing the same process that we did before and completely removing everything from the scene. Of course. But then you've just made a whole bunch more work for yourself. So awesome. Well, happy photoshopping, and as always, I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.